In autumn 1968, a 38-year-old physician was living in southern France with his wife and 16-month-old son. The doctor had problems on his right side and had a limp after he stepped on a landmine in the Algerian War in 1958. The doctor had recently cut himself above his left ankle while chopping wood, which resulted in severe swelling. The two injuries made it painful for him to walk or stand. Around 3:45 a.m. on November the 2nd, the doctor awoke to the sound of his son calling out and went to his room. He found him standing up in his cot and pointing at the window and repeated the words "row," which the doctor identified as baby talk for shiny. Outside the weather was stormy, with strong winds and rain, and what he initially believed was flashes of lightning. Strangely though, after the flashes of lightning, there was no thunder. He stared out of the window at the valley below and found it illuminated by sudden intense flashes of light which were occurring once a second to a distance of about 4 kilometres, but again there was no sound of thunder and he could not see where the light was coming from. He went back downstairs and saw the time was 3:55 a.m. As he poured himself a glass of water, he looked out of the window where the lights continued to flash but could not see where it was coming from. He then limped to the living room and opened up 2 windows, and by now the rain had stopped, but then observed 2 identical luminous objects about 2 kilometres away in the valley below that were moving east in perfect unison. Each object had a round white spotlight on his underside and looked to be oval in shape with 2 distinct sections. The upper section was luminous and silvery white in colour, and the lower section was the colour of a deep sunset red, and he could see it moving. Each of the objects had 3 rod-like protrusions that looked like antennae, with a vertical one on top that was tapered towards the end, and a straight, horizontal one on each side, sticking out from between the 2 layers. The protrusions were about as long as the object was tall, and the same colour as the top, but there was a darker bulge on the underside of the objects where the beams originated. The flashes appeared to be entering back through the antennae and creating a smaller secondary flash between the UFOs that seemed to be reacting with the atmosphere around it. The UFOs then slowly turned north towards the doctor, while at the same time drifted closer to each other until they eventually came together, forming a single beam. Then the 2 inner protrusions touched and the flashing stopped, but continued to move and then merged together, forming a single object. The object then flew straight towards the doctor before abruptly stopping just 200 metres away. Now closer, the doctor could see that the lower reddish half glowed incandescently, like it was lit from the inside, and was divided into 11 sections by vertical lines. 5 of the sections were dark red horizontal lines, moving from top to bottom every 4 seconds, but each at different times, and he watched it for several minutes. The doctor was terrified but transfixed before it tilted in the sky, showing its round underside. It was now beaming its spotlight directly at the doctor, followed by a loud bang before dematerializing, resulting in a fluffy white cloud that slowly dissipated in the breeze, and then a fine white luminous thread flew several hundred meters into the sky. As the doctor looked up, he saw a shining white dot which quickly vanished with a sudden bang, and the UFO was gone. In a state of shock, the doctor checked the kitchen clock that showed 4:05 a.m. The doctor immediately began to take notes and drew sketches of the UFO before waking his wife. One of the first things that she noticed was that her husband was now walking without a limp, and that the cut on his ankle had completely healed, and the pain and swelling had gone. That night in bed, she heard her husband talking in his sleep, and he was saying that contact would be re-established by falling down the stairs on November the 2nd, and he continued to sleep talk before falling asleep at 2 a.m. The following morning he awoke in high spirits, but when his wife asked about the UFO, he had no memory of it. She then showed him the notes she'd written, and was surprised by his own handwriting, but could not remember writing anything. She could see he was upset and decided to keep quiet about his nocturnal sleep talking the previous night. Later that afternoon, the doctor tripped on the living room stairs, hitting his head on the floor, and miraculously regained all memories of the UFO incident. His wife advised him to contact an old friend by the name of Amy Michel, who also happened to be a ufologist. 3 days later, Michel arrived at their home on November the 5th, accompanied by a physicist he'd previously worked with. After arriving, Amy Michel could see that the doctor was still in shock and had trouble accepting what had happened the previous night. After interviewing the couple, the physicist took photos of the valley while Michel added sketches of the UFOs and where they were located in the valley. Michel also inspected the doctor's legs and found only faint scarring on his ankle. In the 10 years that the doctor had had his injuries and had not improved in that time, somehow the doctor's limp had vanished and he'd regained full control of the muscles. However, later that day he began to feel cramping and pain around his navel, which persisted for 1.5 weeks. The area had become itchy and red. Then on November the 13th, the doctor had a strange dream in which a triangle appeared in relation to the UFO he'd witnessed, and after a few days, the redness developed into a triangle around his navel, and the discomfort stopped. A dermatologist later inspected the triangle, but had no explanation for it. But then a triangle suddenly appeared in the exact same place on his son the following day. For the next 2 years, the triangles appeared on the doctor every 3 weeks, and then on his son 12 hours later. Over the next 20 years, this would happen sporadically, where the triangles usually lasted between 2 to 3 days, then in a few hours would completely fade away. On December the 21st and 22nd, 1968, the doctor had 3 deep hypnosis sessions conducted by a specialist in Bordeaux. Strangely, in the weeks preceding the hypnosis sessions, Amy Michel had a popular song stuck in his head all day and night and would whistle it endlessly. Strangely though, after the doctor had had his first session, Michel suggested the doctor play something on the piano to help him relax, and began playing the very tune that had been in his head all week. The doctor told Michel that he'd been practicing it all week. Michel noticed that other people associated with the doctor had reported similar coincidences. However, things got even weirder when objects started to appear in random places around the house, and the electricity in the house would turn on and off, and the French electrical authorities could find no reason whatsoever and called it witchcraft and gave up looking. In the end, it fixed itself. On many occasions, the doctor reported suddenly levitating in his bed and elsewhere in the house, and during one of the episodes, he had some flypaper in his hand and stuck it to the living room ceiling 6 meters off the ground, and later showed it to Michel. On many occasions, the doctor would hear a voice saying something would happen on November the 1st, 1969. The date happened to be the first anniversary of the UFO sighting. So he invited Michel and his wife to spend the night at his house. When they arrived, Michel asked the doctor whether the geometry marks had returned on his navel, and he showed him that it was all clear. But later that night, when he was playing the piano, he abruptly stopped playing and stood up and said, "It's here, it's beginning again." He unbuttoned his shirt and everyone could see a triangle take shape on his abdomen that looked like mild sunburn. The following morning, his mother found the same triangle on their son. Although they never discussed the UFO with their son, for the next 2 years he would experience insomnia and would tell his teacher that it would go off into the sky with a big red machine, the one that made a foo-foo noise in the sky with flashes. After the initial shock of what had happened to him, the doctor felt that the event had had a positive effect on his life, especially after he no longer had a limp, and he and his wife had an appreciation of the unexplained, and that whatever had happened to them left them with a sense of peace and was beyond their understanding.